Hi and welcome to this video on OET writing, specifically how to write a recommendation paragraph in an OET letter. We've had multiple videos based on replicated case notes. We've also done a video on how to write a purpose paragraph. Now this video is completely based on how to write a recommendation paragraph. As you know, the recommendation paragraph is the concluding paragraph of your letter. It leaves a lasting impression about your letter in the minds of the reader. Now, technically talking about it, what kind of ideas are included in the recommendation paragraph, or what is a recommendation paragraph? It's nothing but you're telling the reader what action he or she needs to take in order to provide service to the patient. So what are the things that you're expected out of the reader, the services that you expect out of the reader, which are to be provided to your patient? You mention it in the recommendation paragraph. Now, how do we write this? The first thing that you need to understand is that there is no a standard or general structure or a type or a format when it comes to recommendation paragraph. It varies from writing task to writing task. So the basic idea is that it all depends on who the reader is. So depending on who the reader is, we have to decide which kind of information should you be presenting in the recommendation paragraph first, how you should be presenting the ideas, the tone of your language, how it should sound like. All this needs to be decided depending on who the reader is. Let me show you an example. Now you can see a discharge plan on screen and a writing task. Who is the reader here? Write a referral letter to Miss Amelia Harry, community health nurse. So the reader is a community health nurse. And what are the points given in the discharge plan? We know that we write the recommendation paragraph by taking out points from the plan. The plan tells what needs to be done further. So taking points from the plan, we develop the recommendation paragraph. Now what are the points given in the plan? Home visits by community health nurse thrice a week for dressing. Okay, this is something which the community health nurse has to do. Then educate regarding food hygiene. Again, this has to be done by the community health nurse. Then monitor medication compliance. Again, it is something which the community health nurse, that is the reader, has to do. Then review after 1 week. Now, is that something which the reader has to do? Is the review done by the community health nurse? No. So now, does that mean that we should not be including this in the recommendation paragraph? What do you think? See, this is a point from the discharge plan, and now as per the discharge plan, the community health nurse is going to take over the care of the patient after discharge. So we have to let the community health nurse, that is the reader, know that her patient is going to have a follow-up or a review after 1 week. So you're just informing the reader regarding the same. It's not something regarding which the reader has to perform an action. It's just an update to the reader. So now you have to understand that when it comes to the discharge plan, when you take out the points from the discharge plan and put it in the recommendation paragraph, there can be two types of details. Those details based on which the reader will have to do an action, provide an action to the patient, and those details based on which the reader will not have to do any action, but just an update, just an information to the reader. Okay, now when you write the recommendation paragraph, or when you're going to develop the recommendation paragraph, what are the basic steps that you need to keep in mind before developing a recommendation paragraph? The first thing is, just like how I mentioned now, you need to determine, or you need to identify whether the points in the discharge plan are those which are to be done by the reader or those which the reader just needs to know. You need to differentiate between them. You have to categorize the points in the discharge plan as into two groups, one which the reader needs to do and one which the reader needs to know. Then you have to organize the points. So what do you think? Which points would you be writing at the starting of the recommendation paragraph? The one which the reader needs to do, or the ones which the reader needs to know? Of course, first, the priority should be given to those which are to be done by the reader. And then you can place the points which you can just let the reader know. So first write the points which the reader needs to do, and then followed by that, you write the points which the reader needs to do. And among the points which the reader needs to do, there also, if you need, you can prioritize. For instance, let's get back to our previous screen. See here, 1, 2, 3. All of these points are to be done or performed by the community health nurse. Now, will there be any difference or will there be any difference in any marking criteria when you change the order of these points when you write it in the recommendation paragraph, or should you stick on to the same order as it is given in the discharge plan? Definitely no. You need not stick on to the same order as it is given in the discharge plan. It's up to your logic. Depending on who the reader is and depending on the situation, you can rearrange the ideas. So here, the first point is home visit by community health nurse thrice a week for dressing. The first service is dressing, then is education, then is monitoring. So what do you think for the nurse? What would be the priority? Yes, dressing. First, it's better if you can mention about dressing. Now if you say, like first if you say regarding education and monitoring and then come to dressing, grammatically it is right. Nobody is going to question that aspect. But when you think of the aspect organization and layout, there is an assessment criterion called as organization and layout, which focuses on the logical sequencing of your ideas, how logically you are placing the ideas. Now how do you decide that? That can be done purely based on the reader. So here, when the reader is a community health nurse, we need to understand that it's always better to put dressing first and then followed by that education and monitoring. So when it comes to the steps, first you need to identify which are to be done by the reader, which are to be known by the reader, and then you arrange the sequence. Then once that is also done, then you can start transforming the notes into grammatically right sentences. Now, you can transform these case notes into grammatically right sentences, or you can begin these sentences using these phrases. We call them recommendation phrases. Kindly, please. Why do we use such words? We are just making sure that we are not commanding the reader to provide service to our patient, but rather we are being polite to show that we are using words or phrases like kindly or kindly note, please note that it is essential or it is important, then it would be appreciated or it would be beneficial. Such usages gives a polite tone to your letter. This is also mentioned, this aspect is mentioned in the genre and style assessment criterion, that your language, you should use a polite language, you should not be commanding. So for that reason, make sure that when you write the recommendation paragraph, start off with any of these phrases. Now, like you would have seen a lot of students using, I have seen a lot of students using or starting off the recommendation paragraph with phrases like in light of the above, in view of the above, upon discharge. I wouldn't say them as completely wrong, but it's generally not recommended. They look like kind of memorized phrases, so you will not score here when you go for such usages. So it's always recommended that you can go for usages like generally be straightforward, kindly do this to my patient, or please note, or please provide. You can just be straightforward. Do not go for such memorized phrases like in light of the above, in view of the above, and so on. Again, here I'm saying that it's not completely wrong, but generally it's not recommended. This is another thing that you have to keep in mind, which we always say in class. There's no ultimate wrong or right when it comes to letter writing. Of course, grammatical aspects are there, but other than that, you're free to express your ideas in your own style, provided they are grammatically right and you stay within the boundary of that assessment criteria. Then whatever style you follow, it's fine. Now let's look deeper into how we are going to transform the notes into sentences. This is one area sometimes students tend to make mistakes. Kindly or please, if you're starting off a sentence in the recommendation paragraph with kindly or please, what should follow this word kindly or please? We always need to keep in mind that a verb should come after kindly or please. For example, kindly monitor the medication compliance, or please educate the patient regarding food hygiene. Did you notice that? So always after kindly or please, a verb should come. Now, if you're using kindly note or please note, you put a comma after kindly note or please note. After kindly note or please note, what would come? It should never be a verb. Sometimes students do that. Kindly note, monitor his blood pressure. No, that's a wrong usage. After kindly note or please note, a subject should come. I'm not getting deeper into the grammatical aspects. Subject means you can just use a pronoun referring to the patient, whether he, she, or it need not always be a person, okay? It need not always be the patient. It can be a medication also. For example, I can say that kindly note, he requires monitoring of his medication compliance. So at that instance, he is the subject. Or else I can say that kindly note, education on food hygiene is essential for or is essential to him. So in that case, food hygiene is the subject. Whatever it is, you have to make sure that after kindly note or please note, please don't mention a verb there. Instead, it has to be a subject. The most straightforward form is that kindly note, he or she requires administration of morphine, or kindly note or please note, he or she needs to be educated regarding. So that is one common subject form we use. Other than that, we can go for subject forms like this also. For example, please note, morphine should not be administered to Mr. Jacob after 1 week. So there the subject is morphine. Now another way to start is that kindly note that or please note that. When you're using kindly note that or please note that, you don't put this comma. The usage is same as kindly note or please note. After kindly note that or please note that, you need to mention a subject. Then another different way to open a sentence in the recommendation paragraph is that we can say that it is essential, or it is important, or it is necessary, it is imperative. All these usages are also accepted. That is, it is essential to monitor his medication compliance. That is also the right usage. Why am I showing different forms is because you always need to show your language skills. So you need to bring in variety. How much ever possible, you need to try to bring in variety in sentence construction. So for that reason, I've shown multiple ways in which sentences can be started off in a recommendation paragraph. No matter if you start with all of these sentences, if you start with kindly or please, the idea is conveyed to the reader. The meaning, grammatically it is fine. But just to show that flexibility of using the language, different ways of starting the sentences have been shown here. Then another common way in which students start the recommendation paragraph is with this: it would be appreciated or it would be beneficial. It would be appreciated if you could monitor his blood pressure. It would be beneficial if you could assess Mr. John's condition. So that usage is also another common one when it comes to recommendation paragraph. Now regarding the usage of the word appreciated and beneficial, I would say that you have to be slightly careful to use this depending on who the reader is. Now the writer here is a nurse. Now if the reader is also a nurse is telling to another nurse, it would be appreciated. That is fine. A nurse appreciating another nurse. But in case the reader is a specialist, maybe a cardiologist or a neurologist, then a nurse is writing a letter to the specialist, then I would say that it would be appreciated would not be a good choice. In such situation, it would be beneficial is better. It's not good from a nurse part to say that it would be appreciated. I would say that in such cases, when a nurse is writing to somebody of higher designation, it will be better if you can use beneficial. Now, again, I'm stressing there's no hard and fast rule regarding all of these usages. You can use them, but like it's just relative. Which is better than which? Now I'll show you a few example plans and writing tasks and how we can develop or craft recommendation paragraphs for these cases. This is the same case that I showed you initially, where the reader is a community health nurse. This is a reader, and in the discharge plan, the different points are given. So we already identified which are to be done by the reader: dressing, education on food hygiene, then monitoring medication compliance. All these are to be done, and this is something which the reader needs to know. So how can we construct the sentence? And regarding the priority, of course, let us put this dressing first and then hygiene and compliance. How can we construct? It would be, so here the nurse is writing to another nurse. So it's okay if we use the word appreciated. It would be appreciated if you could provide home visits to Mr. Downey 3 times a week for wound redressing. Okay, you mentioned the first point. Then please educate. Again, this word is used. After this appreciated, you have used the word please. Please educate him on food hygiene and monitor his medication compliance. So this hygiene and compliance have been combined and put as one sentence. Please educate him on food hygiene and monitor his medication compliance, which means that we need not repeat the word please or kindly. With one recommendation phrase itself, we have covered 2 ideas, that is education on food hygiene and monitoring of medication compliance. Then finally, as a note, what we have mentioned, kindly note he has a review after 1 week. So this is something which you're just letting the reader know. So we have placed it towards the end of the recommendation paragraph. I would like to show one more scenario with this same example. Now, instead of community health nurse, suppose if the reader was the community nursing manager. What if the reader was the community nursing manager instead of the community health nurse? Will there be any difference in the recommendation paragraph? Content wise, it's going to be the same. Any other difference? What do you guess? Well, the way in which we deliver the idea will be different. The content, of course, we cannot alter it because the content we are taking from the discharge plan, the content has to be the same. But the way in which we are going to present it will be different depending on who the reader is or depending on the designation of the reader. Now, if we are writing to the community health nurse, you are directly telling the community health nurse to take the action. But to a community nursing manager, we cannot directly say to provide wound dressing or to monitor the medication compliance. We can just say it as a requirement. We need to be even more respectful towards the community nursing manager. So let's see how the recommendation paragraph can be written. How did it start off? Kindly note that Mr. Downey requires, you're just stating it as a requirement. Kindly note that Mr. Downey requires home visits 3 times a week for wound dressing. You're not asking the reader to provide it, but just letting the reader know that. It is also essential to educate him. It is also essential. You are conveying the importance to educate him on food hygiene and to monitor his medication compliance. There also, you're not asking the reader to do it, but just letting the reader know about it. Maybe the community nursing manager will assign a community nurse from his team to take over or to perform these actions. So your job is just to let the manager know these are the requirements of your patient. But if the reader was a community health nurse, directly you can tell the reader to provide these. But here, if it is nursing manager, we are keeping it even more polite by just stating it as requirement. And please note he has a review scheduled after 1 week. I hope that's clear. The difference you need to understand. Now let's look at another example. Here, who is the reader? The reader is a neurologist. So it's a specialist. You have to make a note of that. And what are the points given in the plan? Full neurological assessment. Of course, this is something which the reader has to do. And question mark MRI. Question mark MRI means you're not very sure that the MRI is required. Maybe an MRI might be required. So this also you have to tell the reader. So since it is a probability, you can just, it will be better if you can just let the reader know about this requirement. If this question mark was not there, then of course you can say that kindly provide or kindly provide an MRI. But there also I would say that since it's a specialist, you can be even more polite by saying that kindly consider the need for an MRI rather than saying kindly provide or kindly do an MRI. It will be better if you can say that kindly consider the need for an MRI. By you can sound even more polite and respectful there. Now in this case a question mark is there, so definitely you cannot say it as a requirement. Just let's see how it is being written. It would be beneficial. Okay, we have chosen the word beneficial because we are writing to somebody in a higher designation, so better not to say appreciated. Let's go for beneficial. It would be beneficial if you could conduct a full neurological assessment for Mr. Wire. So you have said the first point by saying that it could be beneficial if you could conduct. See, if you could conduct, we have not said that it would be beneficial if you could do, sorry, it would be or you have not stated it as he requires a neurological assessment or kindly provide a neurological assessment. We have just made sure that we are being polite here by constructing the sentence using words like if you could, it would be beneficial, because here the reader is a specialist. And regarding the next point, question mark MRI, since that question mark is there, how did we manage to include that or express that idea? Please evaluate the necessity of an MRI, which means that now it's the responsibility or the duty of the neurologist to assess and identify whether an MRI is needed for the patient or not, and if needed, let that be done. So that is how the sentence construction goes. I hope that is clear. Now let me just remind you once again that if the reader is a specialist, just be careful regarding the tone that you're using. You should not be commanding. Whoever the reader is, you should not be commanding. But if you're writing to somebody in a higher designation, you should try to sound even more respectful. Now another example. Here what is the difference? Here you cannot see a plan as such is not there. A plan as such is missing, right? The last set of details that you can see are from today. What are the major happenings of this day? Severe pain, no intake of food, medicine, willing to take syringe drive, referred to own GP. So that is the plan. The patient has been referred to his or her own GP regarding syringe drive and administration of medication. So you know that, so you understand that the reader is the patient's GP. The reader is the patient's GP. And what is the requirement? Requesting home visits for prescription of syringe drive and medicines for pain relief. Now we don't have a plan here, but we understood who the reader is. This is the reader, and the requirement is prescription of, this is the requirement. The things which the reader needs to do are prescription of syringe drive and prescription of medicines for pain relief. Now in such a situation, when you don't have a separate plan, or if you don't have separate points to be included in the recommendation paragraph as such, then what do? Usually we take points from the discharge plan and then we develop the recommendation paragraph. Now if we don't have a plan as such here, then it is okay if you can include, or if you include the points from today, if you can bring down the details from today's visit into the recommendation paragraph, that is also fine if you don't have other points to be included in the recommendation paragraph. Now about this, there are multiple visits, and finally they are talking about today's visit. So in such case, what I say is that all the multiple visits you can group and put in one paragraph, and the today's visits you can bring down to the recommendation paragraph and state the requirement along with that. Let's see, I'll show you the sample, then you'll have better understanding. How did it start off? Kindly visit Mr. Jones at his home, because in the writing task it is mentioned home visits. So kindly visit Mr. Jones at his home to initiate syringe drive and prescribe appropriate pain relief medication. So that is the actual thing which the reader needs to do. Now to elaborate the recommendation paragraph, if needed, you can include the idea or include the points from today into the recommendation paragraph. How can we bridge it? By saying that as he is currently experiencing severe pain and is unable to take food or medication orally, Please note that Mr. Jones and his wife have agreed to proceed with the syringe drive. So these 3 points from today's visit have been brought down to the recommendation paragraph. First you stated what the requirement is, and then you gave the reasoning from the today's visit to provide better clarity to the reader. This is also fine. Now it's not compulsory that you should be including only the points from the discharge plan into the recommendation. It's well and good if you have enough points from the discharge plan to develop the recommendation paragraph. In situations when you don't have enough points, you can go for this approach as well. Now let's look at one more sample. Here again, you have plan here, but there aren't many points, just one point, referral to dermatologist. Now what actions are to be done by the dermatologist, it's not mentioned in the plan, but here in the writing task, the reader is dermatologist, and in the writing task it is mentioned that requesting further assessment and management. So the only idea which we get to be included in the recommendation paragraph is further assessment and management. Now here assume that there aren't multiple visits mentioned in the case note, only one visit, single visit, and that is today's visit. So you cannot bring down the ideas of today's visit to the recommendation paragraph, unlike how we have done for the previous sample. For the previous sample, there were multiple visits, and today's visit alone we brought down to the recommendation paragraph. But in case when you have only one visit, that is today's visit, and you don't have any other ideas or points in the plan, how can we deal that situation? How can we deal with that situation? Let's see. See, what we have to basically do here is that, what we can do here is that we will have to rewrite the purpose paragraph. You need to understand that the purpose paragraph and recommendation paragraph basically convey the same idea. The recommendation is nothing but an expansion of the purpose paragraph. So the meaning that the purpose and the recommendation paragraphs would be given out to the reader will be the same. But in purpose paragraph, we present it in a concise form, and the recommendation paragraph, we are stretching out that idea. So here, since there aren't too many points in the discharge plan, we are forced to actually rewrite the purpose paragraph. By rewriting, I don't mean that you have to just copy and paste the purpose paragraph exactly as the recommendation paragraph. No, that shows your lack of vocabulary and lack of your flexibility when it comes to the language skills. So what you should do is that when you rewrite the purpose paragraph as the recommendation paragraph, care should be taken not to repeat the words in the purpose paragraph and not to use the same sentence structure. The idea should be the same. We cannot put in new, or we cannot add on new ideas from our assumption. That's not allowed. The content has to be which is given in the case note, but we should try to actually rephrase it using our language skills. Now assume that we have written the purpose paragraph like this. I am writing to refer Ms. Jake, who is suspected to have a flea bite. She requires your further assessment and management. That's the purpose. Now in recommendation also, we are left with only that idea. We cannot add on anything. Then how can we write the recommendation paragraph? I'll show you. It would be beneficial, okay, if you're writing to a specialist, a dermatologist, it would be beneficial if you could apply your specialist expertise. You can bring in such terms. It's not a new idea. It's from what is given in the case note, or as per what is given in the writing task. We are fetching the ideas from there. If you could apply your specialist expertise in evaluating Ms. Jake. Evaluating means, just you have paraphrased this assessment. In evaluating Ms. Jake, confirming her diagnosis. This is also not a new idea, because what is the situation or the current problem of the patient? The patient is suspected to have a flea bite, and we are writing letter to the reader, to the dermatologist, to assess and provide further management. So of course the reader will have to confirm the diagnosis of the patient. He is a dermatologist. So we can say it in, or we can state it in this way: evaluating Ms. Jake, confirming her diagnosis. This is something which the reader is going to do. So it's not a new idea out of nowhere. It is something we understand as per this writing task. Confirm a diagnosis and guiding appropriate dermatological management. This management, we have stretched it out to dermatological management. just to sound a bit different. Basically, both of these ideas, this and this, are the same, but they have been written in two different ways just to show your language flexibility. Okay, so now that we have seen different ways or different variations of writing the recommendation paragraph, I hope you'll apply them when you do your letter writing next time. I hope it was helpful. Please let us know your feedback. And if you have any doubts or queries regarding the discussion we had, please feel free to post them in the comment section. Stay tuned until we meet next time. Thank you.
Medcity International Academy. Trusted hands forever.